Hi, this is Rick Levine with your mid-month update for December of 2020. I held off a few days on the mid-month update because I really wanted to catch the wave of this extraordinary day. Extraordinary day is December 21st, and I've not seen another day in since my studies in astrology quite like this one. I mean, look, this has been an extraordinary year, beginning with the Saturn-Pluto conjunction back in mid-January of 2020. And we've had three Jupiter-Pluto conjunctions. We've had this incredible year with just powerful dynamic energy throughout the year. We had a season of retrogrades with the three outer planets, Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto, all clustered together and all going in and out of retrograde together, with an extended Venus retrograde, a Mars retrograde, a couple of Mercury retrogrades. It's just been an incredible year. December so far, we've seen it all. We've had the second of two eclipses, and we're kind of now theoretically in a coasting zone because we've had planetary sign changes. We've had both Jupiter and Saturn leaving Capricorn, moving into Aquarius, where they are now. They're actually conjoining today. We'll get back to that in just a moment. And on today we also have the Sun entering Capricorn. We also had just a couple of days ago, we had Mercury moving into Capricorn, actually just yesterday on Sunday, the 20th. I'm recording this early in the morning on the day of the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction and the winter solstice here in the northern hemisphere. Obviously the southern solstice for our friends in South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, and Antarctica and other English speaking places in the southern hemisphere. I think the thing that we want to really talk about today is the extraordinary nature of this cluster of energies that is occurring right now on the 21st of December and how that fits into the rest of the month. Granted, we're really only looking at a week and a half period right now because we will have the January forecast that will come out before New Year's Day. And so we really want to focus on what it is that's going on now and why this period of time, even though it's almost like the events are done, why they're not done yet. For months, people have been asking me, when is this going to be over? And by this, I think people mean March. When is this this strangest year we've ever experienced? When are these events going to be finally passing along that we can look back at them and go, that was a really difficult, awkward, strange, weird time. It was a time of opportunity, a time of difficulty. But we're not there yet because we're still in it. We can't look back at it until it's a done deal. I think a lot of people are putting a lot of weight into today's Jupiter-Saturn conjunction at 0 degrees of Aquarius. Remember that Saturn moved into Aquarius on Thursday, the 17th. And then Jupiter, just over the weekend on Saturday morning, Jupiter moved into Aquarius. Jupiter moving faster than Saturn, caught up with Saturn literally now. I mean, it's in the process right now. We're still a few hours away as I record this from the actual technical conjunction at 1:20 p.m., and that's Eastern Standard Time. But when we're talking about slow-moving planets like Jupiter in a 12-year cycle and Saturn in a 29.5-year cycle, to say that it's at 1:20 is a bit crazy making, because it's really, they move so slowly that even though technically that can be the time, the fact of the matter is just the size of their bodies are actually moving in and coming closer together and touching. And the fact is that we're feeling this conjunction for the last several days, maybe even the last several weeks, and we will still be feeling it coming out of it over the days and weeks ahead. On top of that, however, we had the sun moving into Capricorn at 5:02 a.m. And again, that's Eastern time. All times today will be in Eastern time. Um, and the sun moving into Capricorn at 5:02 a.m. Is the moment of the winter solstice. And the solstices are extremely important because they are the placeholders, they are the hinges, the cardinal points. The word cardinal comes from a Latin word cardo, which means a hinge, and a hinge holds still while everything else moves around it. And even the cardinals in the Catholic Church were named cardinals because they were holding their position while the politics of the day and the changes actually moved. And so we are at one of these hinge points. And within just a few hours of this hinge point, of the cardinal point of the winter solstice in the northern hemisphere, we have this incredible Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, which happens every 20 years. So it's not that incredible, except there are things about this that make it much rarer, and we'll get to those in just a few minutes also. On top of all of that, we have at 5:32 p.m., and again, Eastern time, we have the moon moving into Aries. So the moon we start the day with the moon in Pisces. And by this afternoon, 5:32 p.m. on the East Coast, that would be 2:32 here in Seattle on the West Coast, the moon moves into Aries, and that's a thrust forward. So what we have today is we're at a turning point again. We're at a hinge point. We've been through the major transitions. We are now in new territory. We have Saturn and Jupiter in Aquarius. They're not moving back into Capricorn again. Jupiter for 11 years and Saturn for 27 years. The fact of the matter is that we are now moving ahead. However, we have some tricky dances that Mars is doing this month and on into next month that really prevent us from being done with this phase. And interestingly, we will see that the final kick on this particular phase is around the day of inauguration, and so it really isn't until the end of January when we finally get to look back on whatever it is that happened here and begin to write the history and untangle the facts. So let's bring up a chart. Okay, so we are now looking at a chart for noon today, December 21st. This is the first day of winter in the Northern Hemisphere. The sun is at 0 degrees of Capricorn. We can see that Mercury at 1 degrees of Capricorn is moving faster than the sun right now. It actually aligned with the sun just a couple of days ago. But what we want to see is that the sun is now at 0 degrees of Capricorn. And we can also see now that Saturn and Jupiter are both in Aquarius at 0 degrees of Aquarius. If we were to back this up a couple of days, we can see here that Saturn at 29 degrees, this is on December 16th, was at 29 degrees of Capricorn. Then Saturn moved into Aquarius along with the moon, and that was on the 17th. And then a couple of days later, Jupiter moved into Aquarius. And as we move this ahead, we can see that on the 21st, that Jupiter and Saturn trade places. Jupiter actually catches up with Saturn, and because Jupiter is moving faster than Saturn, it will continue to increase its distance from Saturn. Now, The thing about this Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, and it's been getting a tremendous amount of airtime on the internet. In fact, even Google did their Google animation showing the alignment of what we call the Great Conjunction, and that is the once every 20-year conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn. Interestingly enough, there are a number of things that make this conjunction more interesting than a typical a typical every 20-year Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. The first is that there is some correlation, and I'm not going to go deeply into this now. I've done separate talks on this and I've written about this, but there's a lot of material around the Star of Bethlehem and the astronomical phenomenon that may have caused the Magi, the three wise men, the three astrologer priests, Zoroastrian priests, that caused them to go looking for the King of Kings, the King of the Jews. And there's a lot of evidence that suggests that this star that they saw, that no one else did, even King Herod didn't until they pointed it out, that this star was actually a conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn. And the thing is that although this happens every 20 years, sometimes when it occurs either there's a different nuance or it occurs in a more special way. The larger pattern of this conjunction cycle is that it returns in the same place in the zodiac approximately to where it was every 800 years. And in doing that, it spends about 200 years in each of the four elements. And so it spends 200 years in the earth element, where every 20 years it would be in each of the elements going backwards. So it would be, let's say it would be in Capricorn, and then 20 years later it would be in Virgo, and then 20 years later it would be in Taurus, and then 20 years later it would be in Capricorn again. And it would keep going through that cycle until it actually changed elements. And every 200 years, there's a period where it goes, just like a planet can go direct and retrograde and direct. We had Saturn going into Aquarius back in March, and then it moved back into Capricorn, and now it's in Aquarius for real. And just like that retrograde motion, there is a regression that occurs in this cycle of this conjunction occurring in different elements. The reason I'm spending so much time here is because we have been in a period of time where for the last couple of centuries, the Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions were in Earth signs. And then in 1980, they occurred in Libra, an air sign. And then back in 2000, actually very beginning of 2001, they were back in Taurus, an earth sign. And with this conjunction, we begin a phase of the next couple of centuries where the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction will reoccur in one air sign after another. In fact, the next conjunction is in 2040, and that occurs in Libra. And then after that, it's in 2060 in Gemini. And then after that, it's in 2080, and that's back in Aquarius. And it goes through that same cycle again, Libra, Gemini, Aquarius, until it moves backward in 2059 into water signs. And then it'll spend a couple hundred years, or nearly that, about a century and a half or two, in water signs. So there's been a lot of noise about this Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in this, what we call the grand, or the Grand Mutation, where every 200 years it changes elements and stays in that element for a century and a half or two. And there's been a lot of talk, because this particular conjunction is in Aquarius, that this is the gateway, that this is the threshold, that this is the opening of the door to the age of Aquarius. It's not. Now, the fact of the matter is that no one knows when the age of Aquarius actually begins, because in order to know when it begins, we have to know when the age of Pisces began. Now, we do know some things, though, and I'm just going to step through them very briefly, because it's so strongly being played right now on the internet, and there's a lot of astrologers who are actually passing along information that may not be correct. Now, granted, there are a lot of differing opinions on this, but there are some things that are factual. One of the facts is this, that the ages have nothing to do with the movement of the planets. The changing of the ages has to do with what we call the precession cycle of the equinox. The precession of the equinox is based on this. When you spin a top, it slows down and it wobbles backwards until it falls over. The Earth wobbles backwards. In fact, one complete wobble of the axis of the Earth takes 25,920 years. Now, the ancients knew this. We know this because what happens is that the day of the equinox, if you look and see where the stars, where the planets are, where the sun is in the zodiac, it basically slips backwards 1 degree every 72 years. 1 degree every 72 years, 72 times 360 degrees in a circle equals 25,920. That's how many years it takes for one complete wobble. Since the zodiac, as we moderners use it, the zodiac divides the cycle into 12 equal parts, regardless of the sizes of the constellation. As we know, we moderners use the zodiac that is not based on the constellation. It's based upon the seasons, and it's based upon the division of a circle into 12 equal sectors. Well, 12 into 25,920 turns out to be 2,160. Now, people are saying that the ages are about 2,000 years long, that the age of Pisces began around the birth of Jesus, and therefore around the year 2000, give or take some time, that is when we're going into the age of Aquarius. The fact, though, is that an age is not 2,000 years long. It's 25,920 divided by 12, which equals 2,160. Now, we don't know what year the age of Pisces began. We do know that the age of Pisces is the age of Christianity. At least that's how it's been referred to. In fact, it used to be measured, time used to be measured by BC, before Christ, and AC, after Christ. We now, and even the AD is Anno Domino, it's the year of our Lord. This is the year of our Lord, 2020. The point is that the symbolism of Pisces, which is the symbolism of the church, it's the multiplicity, it's the dividing of the loaves, it's the Christ as a fisherman of souls. There's a lot of correspondence between the ages and the predominant religions. We could even go back another couple thousand years or so to the age of Aries and talk about the Paschal Lamb and the Ram, and the Mars being Aries and the angry god of Judaism, and the Passover occurring in the spring with the blood of the Lamb and so on. We could go back another couple of millennia, and we would see the rise of Hinduism, and even in the Egyptian realms, that the worship of the cow, the holy cow, the sacred calf, that this was an earth-based and more sensual age. The religion of those times were oriented in that way. So, assuming that there is validity to the idea that the age of Pisces began somewhere around the birth of Jesus. And it's important to understand that we keep time based upon the beginning of what we might call this age. This is the year 2020, soon to be 2021. It's 2021 years from what? Theoretically, it's from the beginning of this age, the age of Christianity, the birth of Jesus. Unfortunately, and this is a separate topic, it's very likely that Jesus was born in 7 BC, and because there was a whole mess up with the calendar, and it was Johannes Kepler who calculated that there was a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in the sign of Pisces in 7 BC, and that very likely was the star of Bethlehem, especially since the Magi were astrologers and they would have noted such an event. Now, all of this comes to the point of this Jupiter-Saturn conjunction occurring on the solstice, occurring within a few days of Christmas. So, and it being such a close one, normally when this conjunction happens, there is a difference in celestial latitude and declination, so that it looks like the two planets, Jupiter and Saturn, are actually distant from one another. However, this year, they are so close that with an unaided eye, with just just normal vision, you can see it on a clear sky tonight, or it was earlier this morning. And the two are so close together, they look like one star. And remember, to the ancients, the word star included planets. Planets were just stars that wandered. They were wanderers. The proximity of this conjunction to Christmas, and it heralding the concept, the notion of the Christmas star, plus it being in Aquarius, heralding the idea of it being the age of Aquarius, is really mixing up some very important facts. It is very likely that the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction was related to the Christmas star, but I did some research, and this is the closest to Christmas that this every 20-year cycle has been since, well, actually, even including in the year 14 AD, there was a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction on December 26th in Sagittarius. On December 24th, that would be Christmas Eve, and this one really is very interesting. It's also in Sagittarius, but that occurred in the year 868. That's nearly 1,200 years ago. And in the last 1,200 years, there has not been a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction this close to Christmas, nor has there been one, at least in the past 2,500 years, that was actually on the same day as the solstice. All of that makes this much more important. However, it does not make it the entrance to the age of Aquarius, because if we were to assume that the age of Pisces began around the birth of Jesus, then the age of Aquarius would begin 2,160 years after that. Or even if you account for the fact that Jesus was probably born in 7 BC, then the age of Aquarius doesn't begin until the year 2153, about 133 years yet into the future. I know there are people who say the age of Aquarius definitively began around the American and French revolutions. I know there are astrologers and people who say the age of Aquarius began with flight and Kitty Hawk, and there are those who have specific dates in the 1800s, the 1900s. The fact of the matter is that the transition, the cusp, the edge between these two ages, the age of Pisces and the age of Aquarius, could last 100 or 200 years. It's it's a 26,000 year cycle. Having said all that, I think it's real important that we don't confuse planetary movement and the fact that there is this grand mutation to this great conjunction cycle that is now occurring in Aquarius. And it certainly is buzzing the Aquarian energy. It's certainly a harmonic or an overtone or a resonance to it. But the age of Aquarius is most likely still a century and a half away. All right. So let's run through the last few days of the month, and I just want to say that what I just talked about is really important. It's really the crux of what this mid-month update is, but I know that people are really wanting to drill down a little bit more on what's going on, and we will do that a little bit right now. So here we are again looking at this chart, and we can see that Jupiter and Saturn have in fact moved into Aquarius, and they are now joined up. And in fact, that the Sun and Mercury are still lingering back in Capricorn. So we still have some Capricorn energy, and we will for the whole next month. But the fact is that the heavyweights of Jupiter and Saturn are now kind of encouraging us, prompting us to look forward rather than backward. So we're going to move this ahead a day at a time, and we're going to just stop at some of the important points here. On Tuesday, we have the moon in Aries, and that moon in Aries is going to be lining up with Chiron. We don't have any huge aspects, but we do have Venus making a square and a half with Mars and a half a square with Pluto. So there is a little bit of tension in the air on Tuesday. But the tension that's building on Tuesday is really coming up to what may be, I don't want to say the most significant event, because it's hard to out-significant the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. But you can see that even on Tuesday, the 22nd, that Mars is at 23 degrees of Capricorn, and that it is exactly square to Pluto on early in the morning on the 23rd. So this is showing right now noon, so it's actually showing Mars a little bit ahead of that conjunction. But Mars squares Pluto in the morning on Wednesday the 23rd, and the moon is moving right there into that mix. So we have a Moon-Mars conjunction squaring Pluto. Now, I just want to refresh our memory a little bit, because remember, Mars went direct retrograde and direct through the squares to the three planets Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto, when they were in Capricorn. And Mars first squared Pluto in mid-August. And in fact, then Mars squared Saturn the end of August. Mars squared Jupiter even back at the beginning of August. So in August, we had this tense energy of Mars making those three squares. Mars then turned direct, and on September 29th, Mars squared Saturn, going retrograde, and then it backed up over Pluto on October 9th, and then by October 18th, it was backing over Jupiter. So we've had Mars square Pluto back in mid-August and in early October. And now that Mars has turned direct, last month in November, it turned direct. Now we have Mars making its third and final direct pass, squaring to Pluto. And I cannot overstate the importance of this, because this might be the most dangerous, treacherous, this might be the hardest point in this whole process, because Mars and Pluto, when they get together, can stir up some nasty shit. I mean, Mars is the god of war. Mars is passion. Mars is conflict. Mars is spontaneous. Mars is anger. It's the angry red planet. Mars is the heat of passion. The moon lining up with Mars is stirring that energy up even more. And Mars in ancient astrology, traditional astrology, Mars was associated with both Aries and Scorpio. In modern astrology, we've given Pluto over to Scorpio also. And here we have that connection between Mars and Pluto. Mars is great at starting fights. Pluto is awesome at finishing them. Pluto is much deeper than Mars. Mars is the spontaneous energy that's on the surface during the conflict, and Pluto is the energy that's coming from the underworld, coming up and surging up and sustaining that energy for as long as it takes to finish what it starts. Often when Mars and Pluto get together by conjunction, square, opposition, there's often a power struggle. There's often the energy Mars to directly go somewhere, Mars, and yet there's an undertow. There's a power that has to do with suppressed, repressed anger, jealousy, subterfuge. There's stuff going on beneath the surface. That's Pluto. Pluto is the subconscious. It's the unconscious. Pluto being the hell realms. There's stuff that is hidden, that's down deep. And when Mars and Pluto form a hard angle like they are now, it can stir up some pretty dark stuff. And I have not in this moment taken the time to go back and look at specific events, if there were any, in around August 13th or around October 9th. But if anyone wants to post them here, that would be cool. But we do have this coming to a head, and the exact square is on December 23rd. And I think that'll be a little bit of an eye of the needle that we'll need to go through in order to come out of this particular phase. This has, like I said, been an incredibly difficult and stressful period of time, but we will come out of it. Incidentally, I said that in the larger scope of things, that things wouldn't really be over until toward the end of January. And part of that reason is that although Mars is making its third and final square with Pluto, which may be the toughest of the three squares, it still has to make its square with Saturn and with Jupiter. And it makes its square with Saturn on January 13th. And it makes it square with Jupiter on January 22nd. And so during this phase, this is kind of the last whoosh, the last push of that energy. And Mars moves into Taurus the first week of January, and then it makes its squares to both Saturn and Jupiter. And also in January, it'll make a conjunction with Uranus, because Mars will move into Taurus, and that'll stir up some tower type, energy that we will talk about when we talk about the January forecast in a week or so. So moving on past the 23rd, but this is a big one. I mean, this whole week is big, especially because that moon conjuncts Mars just within a few hours of the actual Mars square Pluto. By Thursday morning, the moon moves into Taurus, and this is obviously Christmas Eve day. And the moon in Taurus is actually now going to make a square to Jupiter and Saturn, because they're in Aquarius. Taurus to Aquarius is fixed sign to fixed sign. There's a square there, and the moon will actually reach its conjunction at 7:55 p.m. That's Eastern time. And so we might see, even though it's Christmas Eve and it theoretically should be a non-news day, we might see some glimpses of what may be occurring the following month when Mars reaches that same degree point and conjoins with Uranus in Taurus in January. So that's Christmas Eve. We get to the 25th, Christmas Day, and we have here early in the morning, we're feeling this on Christmas Eve, we have Mercury forming a trine with Uranus. And this is kind of exciting. This is a buzz. We do get to feel free. We do get to look forward. This is part of that Christmas energy. And interestingly enough, that Mercury trine Uranus, I think, really helps us frame the day. In fact, the moon in Taurus makes a sextile with Neptune later in the day. And so there is some dreamy, some delusional dreams perhaps, but some fantasy is allowed to come into the picture. The moon in Taurus all day on Christmas Day is really a lot about back to basics. It's keep it simple, and it's kind of enjoy where we are however we can, even though life is very stressed for many people. On the 26th, the sun, moving still through early degrees of Capricorn, reaches its square to Chiron in early degrees of Aries. And again here, if we're looking at the 26th, we can see that sun squaring Chiron, and here we have a need to confront some of the wounds. And this has been an ongoing theme throughout late November and into December. And I think it's important here to not step away from the potential of where we can inadvertently hurt someone we love, or even someone we don't know. It's important here to go that extra step in order to heal wounds rather than to deepen them. Also on Saturday, the 26th, we have the moon moving into Gemini in the evening, 6:32 p.m. Eastern time. And the moon is actually seated pretty well as it moves through latter degrees of Taurus and through the early degrees of Gemini. The moon is going to make a trine to Pluto while it's still in Taurus, making a trine to Pluto in Capricorn. And then that moon will move into Gemini. And as it does, it will pick up on trines to Jupiter and Saturn. And so I think the day after Christmas actually is, it's a pretty decent day astrologically. And it's interesting because there's still not a lot going on. Even on Sunday, the 27th, we have a sun quintile Neptune. This is a spiritual, a creative aspect. This whole period of time might be a little bit of downtime in some of the craziness that we've experienced. And on Sunday evening, the sun forms that same trine that Mercury did on Friday, early Friday morning, on Christmas Day morning. The sun now makes that trine to Uranus, and again we're seeing the sense of freedom. We're seeing the potential of breaking away. We're seeing some new stuff coming in, and this is all foreshadowing, I think, what's coming up around the bend. On Monday, the 28th, Venus forms a half square with Saturn. A little bit of annoyance here, a little bit of anxiety. Perhaps I know for a lot of people are off work. A lot of people are off work longer than they want to be because of the restrictions that have been placed on many of us. But this Venus semi-square Saturn might be a feeling of not enough money, not enough love, a feeling of is it all worth it? This is kind of maybe it's a recoil from having a couple of days of uplifting stuff that some of us may kind of hit the ground on Monday. The moon has a little bit of a tougher time also on Monday, as it makes hard aspects all through the day, starting early in the wee hours of the morning, making a series of annoying and conflictive aspects throughout the day. As we get to Monday night, we begin to pick up on the energy of the full moon. The moon is still in Gemini on Monday night, and it doesn't move into Cancer until the Tuesday, the 29th. The moon moves into Cancer at 5:28 a.m. Eastern time. We also have a Venus half square Jupiter. It's very early in the morning, but this is a potential for a little bit of indulgence. We may, hit this up the night before. Interestingly enough, we talked about the Venus semi-square Saturn on Sunday afternoon, on Monday afternoon, and then that would be the 28th. And then on the 29th, Venus does that same aspect with Jupiter, because Jupiter is now moving away from Saturn. And so we're getting the reverse of what we got all last year, where aspects hit Jupiter, big, better, cool, wow, more, and then Saturn, oh no. Now it's the other way around. It's like deal with the heavy stuff and then, oh, okay. And so this is setting a different tone as we're hitting events and maybe being left with a better taste in our mouth, or more potential or possibility as we get to the end of what that event is. The Cancer full moon occurs at 10:27 p.m. Eastern time. That's 7:27 here in Seattle. And the Cancer full moon actually reveals the tension, the polarity between the inside and the outside, between the feelings and the emotions that we protect with our hard outer Cancerian shell, and the going out into the world, the Capricorn, the mastery of the external environment, versus the protection of the internal environment. We may, in fact, have dilemmas about relating to our family versus going out into the world, for example. But often this full moon is really kind of like a turning point. And this year, it turns out that it's the culmination of 2020. It's like we can't get stretched any further than a full moon on the last couple of days. This is on the night of the 29th, so we're just 2 days away from New Year's Eve. And this full moon itself has a bit of tension wrapped up in it. It is square to Chiron, even though the sun is technically past the square. There is still this emphasis on the healing energy, the need to heal, the conflicts that kind of continue to come up. We also have Venus forming a square with Neptune, Venus just coming up to line up with the nodal axis. In fact, the nodes retrograde in motion always, or at least their steadiness is retrograde. And so we're coming into a Neptune squaring the nodes, and Venus on the full moon night and early the following morning on Wednesday morning, Venus squaring Neptune shows us the conflict between the aspirations that we have for those things that we like. Venus in Sagittarius, I like that, I'm going to go for it. They're reaching for what we want. And yet it's conjuncting the South Node. It feels like it's too familiar, like it's a trap. And with Neptune squaring it, there's this sense of, where am I misleading myself? Or who am I misleading? Or who is misleading me? Because there's this sense that we can get kind of caught up in the difference between what we think we desire and actually the spiritual lean that is pulling us in one direction or another. And this full moon actually also is opposite Mercury, because the sun is still close to Mercury, although Mercury is escaping day by day from the sun, getting farther away from it. But communication is also an issue here. And obviously, the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction is still only, a little bit over a degree of orb in separation. And so we still have this dance of being at a seed period. Remember, every new moon is the beginning of a cycle, and the full moon is the culmination. By the same token, the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction is like a new moon, except it's a new Jupiter, really. And in a way, there's a seed that's being planted. This is maybe one of the most intense periods of time ever to plant seeds of intention, going all the way back to the previous moon, the new moon, and catching that wave now and building it up through the Cancer full moon on December 29th. And then coming through on Wednesday morning to the Venus square Neptune. In fact, on Wednesday, the moon trines Neptune. And so we're a little bit in la la land. We can kind of be lost in delusions or not quite sure what's going on. I think that's really what it is that it's just so hard these days to get to the truth in anything. I continue to say, I've been saying this for almost 9 months now, and that is anyone who knows what's going on doesn't. If you meet someone who knows for sure what's happening and where it's going and how we're going to get there, he or she does not know. They don't know because no one knows. We've kind of become untethered. Now, by the time we get to next late January into February, we're going to begin to look back and we're going to begin to get a sense of knowing what happened, but it's still going to take until then before we do. So that brings us up to the 30th, which is the actual, on the morning of the 30th, is the actual square between Venus and Neptune, even though here it shows that Venus is a degree past. We're rounding off here to the nearest degree, and the conjunction is actually early on Wednesday morning. But by the time we get to Thursday, New Year's Eve day, we have the moon slip into Leo on Thursday morning, and the moon in Leo, it actually goes into Leo at 1:57 p.m. in the afternoon in New York, but here in Seattle, it's at 10:57, just nearly 11 a.m. Here in Seattle on New Year's Eve day. And also Venus lines up exactly with the node. Again, this shows a degree off just because we're running the charts here for midday, and both of these aspects happen in the morning. But the other thing that occurs on Thursday, New Year's Eve day, is that the moon moving through Cancer goes through some rough territory. This is before it enters Leo. We may feel this stuff on Wednesday night, the 30th, because by Thursday morning at 3 a.m. East Coast time, that's just after midnight here in Seattle, the moon opposes Pluto. And then by almost 9 in the morning, it squares Mars. And then by 5 in the afternoon, a few minutes before 5, it opposes Saturn. This is after it's moved into Leo now. And then by 7 o'clock, it opposes Jupiter. And then it makes some half squares and semi-squares and some sesqui-squares. And all in all, the energy on New Year's Eve day is a bit glitzy and showy and expressive because the moon has gone into Leo, but it also is a bit out of whack. It's hard to find a place that is comfortable to stand. I think I'll leave the chart for New Year's Day and January and onward for the forecast for January of 2021. I'd also like to take a moment to thank all of you who have watched these mid-month and the beginning of the month updates throughout the year. Normally, these mid-month updates are for my Patreon subscribers, and on occasion I will make one available to everyone. Since so many people have requested information or have been confused about the Age of Aquarius thing, I will be making this publicly available. So I want to thank my patrons who make this possible. And I would also encourage those of you who like this kind of thing to go to patreon.com/Rick Levine, check out the video offerings there. But most importantly, feel free to share this. I mean, this information needs to get out. People need to know what's going on. And there will be a January forecast by January 1st. It's a whole new ball game. And we will see where things go. So as I always say, think cosmically. These are cosmic times. These are times that in 100 or 200 or 500 years, if we are still around, whatever we are then, we will look back at this period of time, this period perhaps from maybe 1950 to 2030, and say that was the most important period of time in modern evolution, historical changes, and so on. We can't tell how big it is because we're in the midst of it, but astrologically, we can tell that it's big. So more than ever, don't be afraid of thinking cosmically. Thinking cosmically is right on now, because the more cosmically we can think, the better perspective we have on what it is that's happening. However, thinking cosmically is only half of the equation. We have to act locally. And we have to act locally by taking what we know and sharing our awareness and remembering that divisiveness doesn't work. That being kind, being compassionate, being open to conversations, to trying to understand other people's perspectives and points of view, this is what's important. And so more than ever, think cosmically, but act locally. I'm Rick Levine.